Back or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're wondering when it comes, is it no exit for Bashar al-Assad on the day when NATO approves the deployment of Patriot missiles to the border between Turkey and Syria amid what it calls grave concerns over possible chemical weapons. Here to talk about it with us, former ambassador to Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. From Istanbul, Murat Yetkin, editor-in-chief of Hurriyet Daily News. And here in the studio, Rahaf Harfoush, editorial director at SyriaDeeply.org, which has just gone online.
Yeah.
As of how much?
As of a few days ago, actually.
As of a few days ago.
Yeah.
And Oleg Koptev, who teaches at the American University of Paris. Just before the break, we heard James Jeffrey say it wasn't a good idea to bring Iran into discussions at this point. Murat Yetkin, do you agree?
Well, Ambassador Jeffrey has a point by saying that Iran has no neighborhood with Syria, but Iran is a player in the region, and Iran is perhaps the only open supporter of the Syrian regime left in the region. And Iran has an influence on Lebanon, neighboring Syria, and the whole region, the Palestine and Jordan. So it might be realistic to listen to Iran, at least what they are saying. Yes, Russia is a permanent member of UN Security Council, but Iran is a player in the region. Perhaps it doesn't sound very brilliant to Western ears, but Iran is a reality in this region. And when it comes to Russia, Russian position is changing. It is impossible not to see that, and Russia is not giving 100% support anymore to Bashar al-Assad regime in Damascus.
All right. As we reported at the outset, the situation within Syria, let's talk about it now. The pressure seems to be mounting. We've again had word this Tuesday of clashes near the airport road in Damascus. International flights canceled again. Vast swathes of the north effectively under rebel control. Last week we were saying how the use of ground-to-air missiles marked a new turning point. France 24's Asia Siab crossed over the Turkish border and sent us this report.
It took the rebels 55 days to overrun this strategic military base, 15 miles west of Aleppo. Base 46 was one of the most important regime strongholds in the north of the country, hailed as the base of death by people in the region.
We used to call it the base of death because there are 150 villages all around. And from this base, the military was shelling the whole region on a daily basis. People were dying every day in all the surrounding villages.
The fall of Base 46 is a significant step in the rebels' expanding control in the regions of Idlib and Aleppo, along Syria's northern border with Turkey. It is also one of the most important munitions coups for the rebels since the start of the uprising. The fighters took away and hid armored vehicles, rockets, and artillery shells. Most importantly, the rebels found anti-aircraft missiles, which were used successfully last week. General Al-Faj, who led the Base 46 battle, insists on one point, that none of these anti-aircraft missiles were delivered by foreign countries.
I want the lies about weapons to stop. We haven't received any sophisticated weapon from anyone abroad. We took these weapons from the regime.
The rebel general won't disclose how many of these missiles they now have in their hands, nor where they have been deployed. But with these anti-aircraft weapons, he says the Free Syrian Army is now able to set up a no-fly zone in the north of the country.
James Jeffrey, the claim of that rebel general that it wasn't outside help, that it was from within, that these were ground-to-air missiles captured off of the Syrian army, that claim has been met with a little bit of skepticism. Before, they weren't able to shoot down planes, and now they are. Where do you stand on this?
Well, first of all, congratulations to you reporters who are showing great courage going in and reporting on the scene in a very dangerous situation. We learn a lot through them. I think there's a lot of credibility in these claims that people are capturing these weapons. Many of the Sunni men who were active in the uprising, of course, have been through military training, and some of them probably have some access to the technical capabilities with these typically SA-7 Russian-made missiles. And therefore, from the best of our knowledge, missiles have not been provided from outside. Most of the friends of the insurgents, for example, use U.S. Stinger-type missiles, and we've seen no indication that they're in country. So therefore, most likely, these Russian-made missiles have been captured by the insurgent forces.
Murat Yetkin, do you agree?
Well, I agree, actually, because Syria has these weapons, and Turkish people are experiencing the use of those weapons closely in the last few months. I want to remind that a Turkish reconnaissance jet was shot down by Syrian fire in the international waters of offshore Syrian shore. So there are shelling of Turkish border. There are Turkish people killed, and some 200,000 people, as Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan said a few days ago, have already fled to Turkey, and they are in refugee camps. So Turkey is suffering from this war heavily. And the weaponry that the Syrian army has are still there. And some of rebel forces, as the general said, are taking these weapons from Syrian army. But Syrian army has still have enough firepower to create the scenes that you have been showing in this show. In this debate.
In the report.
So it is a reality.
Raarfouch, the situation inside of Syria, you just heard there Murat Yetkin say there's still a lot of arsenal, a lot of firepower there. In the last week, though, what have we seen? We've seen these increasing attacks on the capital, Damascus. We've seen also sort of circumstantial evidence that things aren't exactly going right. One of the main foreign ministry spokesmen who's either been expelled or defected, we're not quite sure. The internet being down for 48 hours. What's your sense when you speak to relatives inside of the capital or in other places inside of Syria?
I mean, it's an information. The information just comes, and it's oftentimes it's conflicting. Some family members are feeling far more optimistic. Others are just feeling like things are at a breaking point. The internet shortage was quite worrisome, I know, for many of us who couldn't access or didn't have any access to our family and friends. There was at one point where the phone lines were down, text messages weren't going through, Skype wasn't working. And it's moments like that where everyone, I feel, is just holding their breath, waiting to hear for the worst terrible news. We've heard of family members who have had apartments ransacked, who have been attacked at ATM machines, everything from lines at bakeries being upwards of 5 hours, increasing cost for food, not enough food. So we're hearing, I think it's particularly surprising in Damascus, which for the majority of the conflict has been quite a stable presence in terms of city life for civilians. And now we're actually seeing some of the conflict sort of bleeding into the city itself. And it's very frightening.
Any predictions from the people you speak to of how much longer Assad can hold on under the current circumstances?
Again, it's been quite a mixed bag. There are some people that feel any day now. There are others that think he will never ever let go of power, that he would do anything to keep it, and that is not limited to chemical weapons, as we've said. So I think ultimately, I think the scariest part of this, to be honest, is that with all the analysis we've been hearing, he still remains a wild card. Nobody really knows what he is going to do, what he is capable of doing. So it's very while it's heartening sometimes to hear that this might be at a turning point, we have been saying it's been at a turning point at several times during this entire process, and we're about 640 days into it, and he is still there, and he is still, civilians are still being massacred. So I think we need to wait and see. About
Assad's state of mind, the New York Times quotes the editor of a Russian foreign affairs journal saying his mood is that he will be killed anyway, Fyodor Lukyanov, adding that only an extremely bold diplomatic proposal could possibly convince Mr. Assad that he could leave power and survive. James Jeffrey, does such a bold diplomatic proposal exist? What would it be?
Well, we've seen this before, and one offer could be a guaranteed refuge in a third country. This could be Iran. This could be perhaps Russia, which is, of course, a quasi-military ally of Mr. Assad's, or a third country with guarantees. This would have to be wrapped in a package that would also include real assurances to the minorities in Syria, many of whom, including Assad's group, the Alawites, Christians, Druze, perhaps some of the Kurds, that they will not be overrun by the Sunni Arab majority in the country. That would be a very, very good initiative for one of these international conferences to take on. And this could be through the UN. It could be through certainly the Permanent Five in the UN Security Council.
Oleg Koptsev, what are the chances of this happening?
I agree 100% with what was just said.
With the concept, but what are the chances of it?
The chances, again, you said it very well. He's a wild card. When people are in a desperate situation like that, and usually when you have excessive power, you tend to become completely paranoid. It's very difficult to take rational decisions. The ideal would be for Russia to invite him over to Russia, offer him a job in Russia, make him director of the largest ophthalmological hospital in Moscow or elsewhere. They're very good in ophthalmology in Russia, and he'll be very happy. Hopefully he'll accept that. We don't know. As you said, he's a wild card. But indeed, the package has to include the minorities. You can't just dismiss the Alawites from power at the moment. You have to be very careful to have a balance of power between all of the minorities and not just kick the hornet's nest like unfortunately has been done in Iraq or in Libya recently.
All right, so it broaches the question, what will the outside world do? And brings us back to that issue that we mentioned at the outset, the chemical weapons. And for some, this is a way for the West to stonewall and to not get involved. Do you agree with that, Ralph Afouche?
I think, I mean, yes and no in a sense, because I think that this conflict, we've seen a lot of international powers be very hesitant to enter at any case. So I think the interesting point of the chemical weapons is that it will force their hand either way, because as we've heard, it seems to be the red line that the people are not willing to cross for the reasons mentioned before. That being said, I do think that everyone's scrambling for time because nobody really wants to pursue any type of solution because, as we've discussed, it's extremely complicated. Who do you arm? What happens afterwards? Who takes control? What are the interests that are at play? It is going to be a headache, and everyone seems to be pursuing this very short-term strategy with, okay, they seem to have chemical weapons, let's shut that down, or they seem to be doing this. And I think very realistically, with everyone involved, they're all hesitant because it is going to be a nightmare of a situation. I mean, this situation could potentially destabilize this country for decades. I think economically, I think from a refugee perspective, from a humanitarian perspective, as we've always said, the pieces and the steps that are going to be needed to rebuild this country are going to far exceed the initial steps of simply arming or not arming a certain party. And yeah.
In the meantime, the power vacuum being filled at times by extremists. We can show you images from Ras Al Ain in the northern Hasaka region that were filmed by the Associated Press Television. Al-Qaeda-inspired Jabhat al-Nusra militants. They espouse Sharia law. They've claimed responsibility for suicide attacks. And they're certainly providing fodder for those who claim that it's better for the West to be in to try to sway the destiny of Syria. But that's a call to arms resisted by the Financial Times' Gideon Rockman. He says we're already heading for a failed state with parts of the country controlled by jihadist militias. What could be worse than that, demands one interventionist. A U.S. official replies, anybody who says that Western intervention cannot make things worse in Syria simply lacks imagination. It is a telling response, but it may not carry the day forever. James Jeffrey, do you agree?
I think that we have to act now for many reasons, one of which is the not only the chance of very radical elements, as you just described, seizing the initiative inside the country. Another thing which I experienced in Iraq in 2004 is before this ends, if we sit back and watch it end, this country is going to get torn apart. There's not going to be anything left of its economy, anything left of its institutions, of its infrastructure, of its service sector, electricity, water, that kind of thing, and it's going to have to be built anew. That came to a cost of several $100 billion in Iraq that the international community and the Iraqis themselves have had to bear. And the same will occur in Syria. And we will have a failed state, and we will have a crisis on our hands that will not go away if we let this thing continue on drifting as it is.
And what does it mean to act now? What does it mean to act now, concretely?
Well, I would say acting now means several things. One is a no-fly zone. You could start by using the missiles tweaked to do certain other things in southern Turkey, along with SM-3 missiles on U.S. Navy ships, to effectively block airspace from Syrian fighters flying at any altitude without putting our jets on the scene. Secondly, bring in some special forces advisors and bring in some weapons to help equip some of these groups, the groups that we believe we can work with best, and have folks on the ground that can start sorting out who can work with us and we can work with and who can't, because there will be a day after here.
Very briefly, Murat Yetkin, because we're almost out of time. From the outset of the conflict, people said, oh, everybody's waiting for Turkey to give the cue on all of this. Do you feel like that?
Well, a no-fly zone is on table for months now. It's under discussion, but as far as I know, it needs a UN Security Council resolution or a UN body decision to impose that. Otherwise, it will not be legal, and there's going to be a Russian and Chinese factor into it. But to build a new Syria should not be as same as building a new Libya or Iraq. The debastification of Iraq costed a lot to the new Iraqi regime, and they cannot even come into themselves yet. They have not. So a new Iraq, a new Syria should protect the minority rights, should protect the rights of Alawites and Nasuris and Christians and Kurds and all that, and also should be in peace with the former regime. I mean, there are names like Farouk al-Shara or Manaf Tlas who took part in the Bashar al-Assad regime, but the new Syria must be in peace with some of the factors of the former regime as well.
All right, so there are options. There are options for building bridges between
Syria, it seems.
Yeah, there are options for building bridges between the old and the new. I want to thank you, Murat Yetkin, for joining us. I want to thank Rav Arfouch, Oleg Koptsev, and James Jeffrey for being with us from Washington. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.